Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you a little inspiration on what to do with those coveted floral vinyls from my new vinyl pack that we released last month. A lot of you guys asked if we're restocking these. Yes, we will be restocking them in June along with a new vinyl pack release. We're going to start by just doing a regular vinyl wrap on this cup. I'm using a 20-ounce skinny straight from Craft Haven. And I'm just kind of folding the vinyl around sort of as like a baseline, I guess, or try to get an idea for the size of vinyl I will need to wrap this cup. I really love this vinyl and I don't want to waste any of it. So I'm taking the time to kind of get an idea of what I don't need, but also give yourself a little bit of a seam allowance so that you don't cut off too much. I'm just making folds here as guides and I will trim off all of the excess. Once we've got that all trimmed up, we're going to start wrapping our cup by folding back about a 1-inch section of vinyl and placing that as straight along the side of the cup as possible. And then to apply it, we're just going to wiggle our squeegee along that vinyl, pressing down firmly enough to push that paper backing off as we're doing the wrap. I love this giant squeegee that I got from the Bowen on Etsy. I will link them down below. Really helps with doing full vinyl wraps like this. Once we get to the end, we're going to have a little bit of an overlap and we're going to press against that seam to get a good idea of where we need to cut. And then I like to place a tape line guide just so that I don't accidentally cut too far. And I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch overlap. Next, we're going to trim off the excess along the top and bottom rim with some scissors, and then I'll run it through my edge trimmer at the top and the bottom on the bottom rung setting just to clean everything up. Now that we're done with our vinyl wrap, we're going to line out where our initial V-split is going to go. I'm not using a template. I'm just going to show you how to do this real simple with your ruler. Holding my ruler against that seam from our vinyl, I'm going to measure down about 6 inches. You can do it however down far you want. And then with my sewing ruler thing, I'm going to measure out 2 inches from the seam up at the top rim. So, 2.5 inches out from the middle seam there on both sides. So if we play connect the dots here, we're going to be connecting those top dots that we made from the top rim with the one dot that we made through that center line on the seam to create a perfectly balanced triangle. And I'm just going to line that out with some masking tape. It can be a little tricky to line up your tape to both dots, but I like to start it from the bottom of the V up to the top. Once we've got that, we're going to use that tape line to trim out that section. And then after we've removed that main V-split vinyl section, we're going to use 1/2 inch masking tape to mask or line out, I guess, what will be the double V. I don't know. This is kind of like a tracksuit split, but kind of a more newer, funner version. And I've seen lots of templates for these and stuff, but I'm old school and I just like to do it with tape. So this is just 1/2 inch masking tape. I'm lining it up against the V section that we just cut out. We're going to trim it up at the point where the two pieces naturally overlap at the bottom. Then I'm going to take 1-inch masking tape and I'm going to place that 1-inch masking tape right next to the 1/2 inch. Again, trimming it out nicely there at the bottom. After we've got our tape placed, I'm going to run my craft knife along each side of the 1-inch masking tape, and then we'll remove those sections to create our double V. Here you can see me repeating the same thing on the opposite side. Once we're all done with that, we should have something that looks like this. It seems like a lot of extra work, but it's really not that bad. I am going to be finishing off my bottom of this cup this time, which I normally don't lately, but this vinyl is just so pretty. I wanted to put a pretty butt on it. So with some of that extra vinyl that we had left over, I'm going to place it on like a sticky cutting mat. And I'm going to use this circle cutter set at 2.25 inches. I used to really hate this circle cutter and I still do, but I find that it actually works kind of better if I put it on a cutting mat. And this is going to easily cut a perfect circle for us without having to fire up our Cricut. Of course, if you wanted to cut this with your Cricut, you definitely could. And I'm placing this right in the little well on the bottom of our cup. Obviously, the circle here will be different sizes depending on the style of cup that you're using. I'm also going to use my circle cutter to cut a circle to mask off that part of the vinyl, because we are going to be spray painting and glittering the exposed steel sections of our design here. Now, I know a lot of you are thinking, why don't you just apply the vinyl after you glitter and epoxy the cup in the pattern that you have there? And while that makes a lot of sense, it's really hard to apply large pattern vinyl sections over a cup that's been glittered and epoxied like that while still keeping everything really sharp and precise. At least it is for me. If you want to do it your way, you can definitely do it your way, okay? And then we're going to mask off all the pattern vinyl parts of our cup that aren't already still masked off from what we did earlier. Next, I'm going to base paint for our glitter ombre. I'm going to start with a flat black spray paint at the top of our cup. Remember, just quick, light, sweeping motions with your spray can, and set it really far back. You should be about 12 to 18 inches away from your cup. And then I'm going to use Rust-Oleum's metallic gold to fill in the rest. The colors that we're using are really like bold and not transparent. So trying to get a perfect ombre on this is not really a huge deal. Just do your best. As soon as that paint was dry to the touch, which for me was about 15 minutes, I was ready to apply my glitter. Of course, I'm going to be using epoxy method as our adhesive for our glitter today. I've mixed 5 milliliters of epoxy, and I'll probably use less than that. I am using my fast setting epoxy. You want to try and get this as thin but as even as possible, and try to avoid the masked off sections as much as you can, which I know is really hard with epoxy method, but if you get a little on the tape, no big deal. We're going to do an ombre today, starting with Obsidian Black by Maestro Creations on the top, and we're just going to get good full coverage along that top rim, and then we'll start to angle our cup at about a 45-degree angle, very lightly tapping our glitter to cascade down the side. This is a horrible camera angle, and I'm really sorry, but you'll notice that I'm just really taking my time gently sprinkling on that glitter. After tapping off the excess for that black, I'm going to go in with a gold, and then again tilting our cup at a 45-degree angle. We're going to really lightly sprinkle this on. Remember, you can always add more glitter. With epoxy method, you just can't take away. So take your time trying to establish that blend. You can go over and sprinkle on more to get more of a blend. So what I like to do is kind of do a rough draft first, really light sprinkling, and then build up coverage once I've established a good blend through that center. After we're done with our glitter, we're going to immediately take off our tape, and I'm going to let this dry for about an hour and a half before we move on to the next step. If you want to brush off the excess after this dries and spray seal it with the spray sealer of your choice, you can definitely do that. I think I forgo sealing because I didn't feel like it this week. Just aggressively tapped off the excess. For our first coat of epoxy, I'm using my fast setting epoxy, and I'm just going to show you guys really quick how I measure and mix. Usually for a first coat over glitter on a smaller cup like this, I'm going to mix 30 milliliters of epoxy. We're going to pour part B first. Then we're going to pour part A. Notice I've marked off equal parts on my graduated mixing cup. And I like to use stainless steel stir sticks with the flat side. And I like using the flat side because I can adequately scrape the sides and the bottom of my cup really well. I'm also wearing gloves when I mix because I almost always get a little bit on my skin. And I like to hold the cup in my hand, which provides just enough warmth for this to really help speed along with the mixing. My epoxy prior to pouring and mixing was not warmed up. It was just a little bit warm from sitting on my heat mat, which isn't even getting turned on these days because it's so warm in my shop. It's about 74 degrees in there. I'm mixing low and slow, scraping the sides and the bottom as I go. Here's a close-up look. You'll see that this is definitely not mixed yet. We want to mix until there's no cloudiness and there's no bands or ribbons in it. Now you will see some cloudiness from bubbles if your epoxy is really cold or you're stirring really fast. What I'm really looking out for are those like ribbons and bands of tracers that I can see as I'm mixing that are coming off of the stir stick. I mixed this for a solid 5 minutes before I was happy with it. Okay, with my fast set, with our Flynn Sisters Supply Shop Fast Cure resin, it's a thicker viscosity, so you do need to mix it for a good while to make sure everything's fully incorporated. Here's what it looked like after about 6 minutes of mixing. Now I'm ready to apply it. There's a little bit of bubbles in there, but it's not a big deal. We're going to pop those once we put them on the cup. I'm pressing down pretty firmly as I'm applying, and as I'm pressing down and gliding my fingers across the cup, it's popping most of those bubbles. Also, because I didn't seal my glitter, I'm going to epoxy the vinyl first. I'm going to try and stay away from that glitter as much as possible. You guys see me do this a lot where I will do this first epoxy coat in sections with my turner off. And this is a very thin conservative coat. Notice I'm not just pouring epoxy on there. After we've got the whole cup coated, I'm just going to hit it with my torch to pop any remaining bubbles. And I'm going to let this dry for about an hour and a half before we move on to a second coat. I didn't even take my cup off the turner for the second coat. I just went right over that first one. And I let this second coat dry for about 4 hours before we moved on to the next step. Your dry times may vary based on the brand and type of epoxy that you're using. Once that second coat was dry, I did do a little bit of sanding, which I did off camera, just to kind of knock down any kind of pokey bits, particularly any around that bottom rim. This is why I don't like doing bottom rims, because they're always kind of a pain to get smooth. But anyway, after sanding, I just cleaned up with some rubbing alcohol on a paper towel. And then I've cut some vinyl stripes to line out our design. So I cut these using Cricut Design Space with the shapes feature. I cut some squares at 11.5 inches wide by 0.10 inches tall. I duplicated that about 8 times. And then I cut it with just permanent vinyl. And I'm using both the 0.10 width stripes and the stripes that naturally get left over in between. So we're not going to waste any vinyl. You guys always tell me to do that, but sometimes I'm just lazy and I don't use it. But I'm using those thicker stripes that are in between for the top and bottom rim lining, and then the skinnier ones to line the V-cut stripes, if you will. I didn't show this whole thing because you guys have seen me do this in videos a million times. You get the idea. Once we've got the vinyl stripes down, I applied my matching decal. If you guys got this floral set, all the patterns came with their own matching decal with really fun little inspirational words and quotes. Absolutely love them. You want to make sure with those decals though that you don't place them over a sanded surface. They want to be placed on a glossy surface because they have a glossy finish. So if you do have to place them on a sanded section of your cup, just spray a little clear gloss spray paint first, let that fully dry, and you can put the decal right over that. And now we're ready for our final coat of epoxy. Before I put that down, I'm just going to go over my cup with some tack cloth. I get a lot of questions about tack cloth. It's not going to make your epoxy fisheye. Just don't press too firmly on the cup with it. This tack cloth has linseed oil in it, but it's not going to deposit any oils on your cup as long as you're not scrubbing your cup with it. You just want to lightly dust off any kind of lint or debris. For my final coat, I'm using 30 milliliters of our Artist Cure formula to keep this bright and beautiful for a long time. And this is what we ended up with. Now, I did not have time this week to get you guys finished photos of this cup. I'm really sorry, but you get the idea from this footage here. I will have finished photos on my Instagram. I'll probably post them in my Facebook group too. And I know this was a really long-winded tutorial, so I'm sorry. But I love how this turned out, and I love this vinyl. Here's another cup that I made with another pattern from the Coveted Florals pack. I hope you guys love this pack as much as I do, and I hope this tutorial inspired you to get out those coveted florals and make something beautiful. Thank you so much for watching my video, and I'll see you again next week. And a big thank you to all of our Flynn Sisters exclusive members. Thank you for your pledge. Your support means the world to our channel. If you love this video, you could check out our last video here. Also be sure to find us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and of course subscribe for all our new videos that come out every Wednesday and Saturday. Thanks so much for watching. See you soon.